The morning sun cast long shadows across the busy military base as soldiers hurried to their duties. Among them walked a figure that made several people turn their heads and whisper. She moved slowly, her right leg dragging slightly with each step. Her uniform was clean but showed signs of wear, and her face bore scars that told stories of battles fought far from home. Sergeant Maria Rodriguez had returned to Fort Campbell just 3 days ago. The doctors had cleared her for light duty, but everyone could see she was not the same soldier who had left 18 months earlier. Her left arm hung stiffly at her side, and when she thought no one was looking, she would wince as pain shot through her injured shoulder. As Maria made her way to the commissary for lunch, she passed a group of younger soldiers sitting outside the barracks. They were fresh recruits, barely out of basic training, their uniforms still crisp and their faces unmarked by the realities of war. "Look at that," one of them said loud enough for Maria to hear. "Another broken soldier coming back from overseas. Why do they even bother bringing them back if they can't do their job anymore?" The others laughed and another recruit joined in. "My dad always said the military was getting soft. In his day, soldiers came back stronger, not limping around feeling sorry for themselves." Maria heard every word but kept walking. She had learned long ago that responding to such comments only made things worse. These young soldiers had no idea what real combat looked like. They had never heard the whistle of incoming mortars or felt the ground shake from roadside bombs. They had never held a dying friend in their arms or made life or death decisions in split seconds. "Hey, Sergeant Limp," called out the loudest of the group, a tall recruit named Thompson. "Maybe you should try the civilian world. I hear they're hiring security guards at the mall." The laughter grew louder, and Maria felt her face flush with anger and embarrassment. She quickened her pace as much as her injured leg would allow, trying to reach the safety of the commissary where such behavior would not be tolerated. Inside the dining hall, Maria found a quiet corner and sat down with her tray of food. She noticed other soldiers glancing at her, some with pity, others with curiosity. The whispers followed her everywhere she went. "That's the Rodriguez woman. Heard she got messed up pretty bad over there. Wonder what happened to her." What they didn't know, what none of them could possibly understand, was that Maria Rodriguez was not just any returning soldier. The scars on her face and the limp in her step were not signs of weakness or failure. They were badges of honor earned in one of the most dangerous places on Earth, during one of the most crucial missions of the entire war. But Maria never talked about what happened in Afghanistan. The military had strict rules about discussing classified operations, and even if she could talk, she wasn't sure anyone would believe her story. It sounded too much like something from a movie, too heroic, too impossible, too good to be true. As she ate her lunch in silence, Maria's mind drifted back to that terrible night 6 months ago. She could still smell the smoke and dust, still hear the screams of wounded soldiers calling for help. She could still feel the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, as she made decisions that would save dozens of lives, but cost her dearly in return. The young recruits, who had mocked her outside, were now entering the commissary, still laughing and joking among themselves. Thompson spotted Maria sitting alone and nudged his friends. "There's our hero again," he said sarcastically. "Bet she's reliving her glory days of getting shot up and becoming useless." Maria's hand tightened around her fork, but she forced herself to remain calm. These boys had no idea what they were talking about. They had never been tested in real combat. They had never had to choose between their own safety and the lives of their fellow soldiers. They had never experienced the kind of hell that had changed Maria forever. What made it worse was that some of these same recruits might end up under her command someday. They might find themselves in dangerous situations where they would need experienced leaders to guide them and keep them alive. But right now, all they saw was a damaged soldier taking up space and resources. After finishing her meal, Maria limped toward the exit, passing the table where the recruits sat. As she walked by, Thompson made a show of moving his chair out of her way. "Watch out, guys. Make room for the walking wounded. Wouldn't want her to fall down and hurt herself even more." The laughter that followed felt like a knife in Maria's heart, not because the words hurt her personally. She had endured much worse than the insults of ignorant young soldiers. What hurt was knowing that these were the people she had risked everything to protect. These laughing faces represented the freedom and safety that she had fought so hard to preserve. Outside the commissary, Maria paused to catch her breath and collect her thoughts. The afternoon heat reminded her of the desert where she had earned her injuries, and for a moment she was transported back to that night when everything changed. She could almost hear the sound of helicopters and the crack of gunfire that had defined the most important hours of her military career. Tomorrow, Maria would report to her new assignment in the personnel office. It was desk duty, far from the action she loved, but it was all the military could offer someone with her physical limitations. She would process paperwork and answer phones while younger. Healthier soldiers took on the dangerous missions she could no longer handle. But what none of them knew, not the laughing recruits, not the whispering soldiers, not even her commanding officers, was that Maria Rodriguez had a secret. Hidden in her service record, classified at the highest levels, was the true story of her final mission in Afghanistan. It was a story that would change everything if it ever came to light. 3 weeks passed, and the whispers about Maria Rodriguez continued to follow her around the base. Every morning she reported to the personnel office where she processed transfer requests and updated soldier records. It was quiet work, far from the adrenaline and purpose she had known in combat zones, but it gave her time to heal both physically and mentally. What her fellow soldiers didn't know was that Maria had not always been just another sergeant in the army. Before her deployment to Afghanistan, she had been selected for the most elite special operations unit in the military. Her record was spotless. Expert marksman, fluent in 3 languages, trained in explosives and advanced combat tactics. She had volunteered for the most dangerous assignments because she believed deeply in protecting innocent people from those who would harm them. Maria had grown up in a small town in Texas where her father worked as a police officer and her mother as a nurse. From an early age, she had learned the importance of service and sacrifice. When terrorists attacked the United States, Maria had been among the first to enlist, driven by a desire to prevent such tragedies from happening again. Her military career had been remarkable from the beginning. In basic training, she had outperformed most of the male recruits in physical fitness and marksmanship. Her instructors noted her natural leadership abilities and her calm demeanor under pressure. Within 2 years, she had been recruited for Special Forces training, where she excelled in everything from language studies to advanced weapons training. By the time she deployed to Afghanistan, Maria had already completed several classified missions in other parts of the world. She had rescued hostages, gathered intelligence on terrorist networks, and eliminated high-value targets that posed threats to American security. Her reputation among special operations commanders was legendary, though her accomplishments remained hidden from the general military population. The mission that had changed everything began 6 months before Maria's return to Fort Campbell. Intelligence agencies had discovered that a major terrorist leader was planning a massive attack on a coalition base that housed over 800 soldiers from multiple countries. The base served as a crucial supply and communication hub for the entire region, and its destruction would have devastating consequences for the war effort. Maria had been chosen to lead a small team of specialists on a reconnaissance mission to gather information about the planned attack. What was supposed to be a simple intelligence-gathering operation had quickly turned into something much more dangerous and complex. As Maria sat at her desk processing routine paperwork, her mind often wandered back to the briefing room where she had first learned about the mission. The intelligence officer had spread satellite photos across the table, pointing out the terrorist camp hidden in the mountains just 50 miles from the coalition base. "We believe they have acquired surface-to-air missiles and are planning a coordinated attack within the next 2 weeks," the officer had explained. "Your job is to get close enough to confirm their capabilities and report back so we can plan a proper military response." Maria had studied the photos carefully, noting the difficult terrain and the multiple escape routes the terrorists had available. The camp was positioned in a narrow valley surrounded by steep cliffs, making it nearly impossible to approach without being detected. Any mistake would likely result in her team being killed or captured. "How many soldiers are we talking about defending?" Maria had asked. 812, including medical personnel, support staff, and civilians working as contractors, came the reply. "If this attack succeeds, it will be one of the deadliest incidents of the entire war." That number had stuck with Maria throughout her preparation for the mission. 812 lives depending on the information she could gather. 812 people who had families waiting for them back home. People who trusted that their military would keep them safe. Back at Fort Campbell, as Maria processed another stack of transfer requests, she couldn't help but notice that some of the papers belonged to soldiers she recognized from around the base. Among them was a request from Thompson, the recruit who had been the loudest in mocking her. He was requesting assignment to a forward operating base in Afghanistan, the same type of dangerous posting that Maria could no longer accept due to her injuries. Reading his file, Maria learned that Thompson had scored well in marksmanship training, but had received negative evaluations for his attitude toward fellow soldiers and his tendency to question orders from female superiors. The report noted that he seemed to view military service as a way to prove his toughness, rather than as a calling to protect others. As she stamped his approval for overseas deployment, Maria couldn't help but think about the irony. This young man who had laughed at her injuries would soon be facing the same dangers that had nearly cost her life. He would be stationed at a base very similar to the one she had risked everything to protect. The afternoon brought a visit from Colonel Martinez, Maria's former commanding officer from her Special Operations Unit. He was one of the few people at Fort Campbell who knew the full extent of her service record, though even he was not cleared to know all the details of her final mission. "How are you adjusting to desk duty?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. Maria looked up from her paperwork and managed a small smile. "It's different, sir. Quieter than I'm used to." Colonel Martinez nodded thoughtfully. "I know this isn't what you wanted, Maria, but you've earned the right to a peaceful assignment after everything you've done for this country." "Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it," Maria admitted. "The younger soldiers here see me as just another casualty, someone who couldn't handle the pressure. They don't understand what really happened over there." "They don't need to understand," the colonel replied firmly. "What you did in Afghanistan saved hundreds of lives. The fact that you can't talk about it doesn't make it any less heroic." Maria appreciated his words, but they didn't ease the daily frustration of being seen as weak or broken. She had given everything for her country and her fellow soldiers, and in return, she had become the subject of cruel jokes and pitying looks. That evening, as Maria walked slowly back to her quarters, she passed the same group of recruits who had mocked her weeks earlier. They were gathered around Thompson, who was showing off his deployment orders and bragging about the dangerous assignment he had requested. "I can't wait to see some real action," Thompson was saying. "Finally get away from all these desk soldiers and broken-down veterans who can't cut it anymore." Maria paused for a moment, wondering if she should warn him about what he was really volunteering for. But she knew he wouldn't listen, and she couldn't explain why her warnings should be taken seriously without revealing classified information. As she continued toward her quarters, Maria made a decision. Tomorrow, she would request a meeting with the base commander. It was time to start the process that would allow some of her story to be told. These young soldiers deserved to know what real courage looked like before they found themselves in situations where that knowledge might save their lives. The helicopter flew low through the darkness, its rotors cutting through the thin mountain air as it approached the drop zone. Maria checked her equipment one final time: night vision goggles, encrypted radio, climbing gear, and enough supplies to last 3 days in hostile territory. Beside her sat 3 other Special Operations soldiers: Sergeant Davis, a communications expert, Corporal Johnson, an explosives specialist, and Private First Class Chen, their medic and language interpreter. Their mission was supposed to be simple: infiltrate the terrorist camp, gather intelligence on their weapons and attack plans, and extract without being detected. The coalition base 50 miles away depended on the information they would gather. 812 lives hung in the balance. 2 minutes to drop, the pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. Maria looked out at the rugged landscape below. The terrorist camp was hidden in a valley surrounded by steep cliffs and rocky outcroppings that provided natural protection from aerial surveillance. Intelligence reports suggested between 30 and 50 enemy fighters, armed with automatic weapons and possibly surface-to-air missiles. The helicopter touched down briefly in a clearing 3 miles from the target, just long enough for the team to jump out with their gear. Within seconds, they were alone in the hostile mountains of Afghanistan, with only their training and each other to rely on. Moving through the darkness, the team made their way toward the valley where the terrorist camp was located. Maria led the way, using her night vision to navigate the treacherous terrain while constantly scanning for enemy sentries or booby traps. The air was thin at this altitude, making every step an effort, But her team moved with the silent precision that had been drilled into them through countless hours of training. After 2 hours of careful movement, they reached an observation point overlooking the target valley. What they saw through their scopes made Maria's blood run cold. The intelligence reports had been wrong. This wasn't just a small terrorist cell planning a minor attack. Spread out across the valley floor was a massive camp with over 200 fighters, military-grade vehicles, and enough weapons to equip a small army. "This is much bigger than we expected," Davis whispered into his radio as he photographed the scene below. Maria studied the camp through her binoculars, counting vehicles and trying to identify the weapon systems. What she saw made her realize that the planned attack on the coalition base would be far more devastating than anyone had imagined. The terrorists had truck-mounted rocket launchers, mortars, and what appeared to be stolen military vehicles equipped with heavy machine guns. But what worried her most was a group of technicians working on something near the center of the camp. Through her scope, she could see electronic equipment and what looked like guidance systems for advanced missiles. If the terrorists had managed to acquire precision-guided weapons, they could destroy the coalition base from a distance without risking their own forces. "We need to get closer," Maria decided. "We have to identify those weapon systems and find out when they're planning to attack." Moving down into the valley required extreme caution. The terrorists had posted sentries at regular intervals, and any mistake would alert the entire camp to their presence. Maria led her team along a narrow ridge that provided cover, while giving them a better view of the camp's layout. As they got closer, Chen was able to use his language skills to listen in on conversations between the guards. What he heard made the situation even more urgent. "They're planning to attack tomorrow night," he whispered to Maria. "During the supply convoy arrival. They know the exact timing and route." Maria felt her heart race. Tomorrow night, a convoy carrying medical supplies and personnel was scheduled to arrive at the coalition base. The terrorists planned to time their attack to cause maximum casualties when the base's defenses were focused on protecting the incoming convoy. The team spent the next several hours gathering detailed intelligence on the terrorist capabilities and attack plans. They photographed weapon positions, recorded radio frequencies, and mapped escape routes. But as dawn approached, their situation became increasingly dangerous. "We need to extract now," Davis urged. "If we wait much longer, we'll be trapped here in daylight." Maria knew he was right, but she also knew that the intelligence they had gathered might not be enough to stop the attack. The coalition base commanders needed more than photographs and radio frequencies. They needed the exact timing and tactics the terrorists planned to use. That's when Maria made the decision that would change everything. Instead of extracting with her team, she decided to stay behind and continue gathering intelligence. She ordered Davis, Johnson, and Chen to return to the extraction point and report what they had learned, while she remained to monitor the terrorists' final preparations. "That's not the plan, Sergeant," Davis protested. "We extract as a team." "The plan changed when we discovered how big this operation is," Maria replied firmly. "Those 800 soldiers at the base are counting on us to give them every possible advantage. I need more time to figure out exactly how this attack will unfold." Against her team's protests, Maria sent them back, while she found a concealed position overlooking the terrorist camp. For the next 18 hours, she watched and listened as the enemy made their final preparations. She learned that they planned to attack in 3 waves. First, long-range rockets to disable the base's communications and air defenses. Second, a ground assault using the stolen military vehicles. And third, suicide bombers who would target the medical facilities and supply areas. As the sun set on the second day, Maria realized that the attack was about to begin. The terrorists were loading their vehicles and preparing to move out. She had all the information the coalition base needed, but she had missed her extraction window. The only way to warn the base in time was to break radio silence and transmit directly from her position. Maria knew that sending a radio transmission would immediately reveal her location to the enemy. With their superior numbers and firepower, she would have little chance of escape. But 812 lives depended on the warning she could provide. Taking a deep breath, Maria activated her encrypted radio and began transmitting everything she had learned about the planned attack. She provided exact coordinates for the rocket launchers, detailed the timing of each assault wave, and gave specific information about the stolen vehicles and their capabilities. As expected, Her transmission was quickly detected by the terrorists' radio equipment. Within minutes, she could hear vehicles starting up and search teams being organized to find her position. Maria continued transmitting until she had provided every crucial detail, then destroyed her radio equipment and prepared for what she knew would be a desperate fight for survival. The first enemy patrol found her position just as she finished sending her final message. Maria used her superior training and equipment to eliminate the initial search team, but she knew more would follow. Throughout the night, she fought a running battle through the mountains, using her knowledge of guerrilla tactics to stay ahead of the pursuing terrorists. By dawn, Maria had been wounded twice, once in the shoulder by rifle fire and once in the leg by shrapnel from a grenade. But she had successfully delayed the enemy search long enough for her intelligence to reach the coalition base. As she took cover behind a rocky outcropping, she could hear the distant sound of aircraft engines. The coalition forces had received her warning and were launching a preemptive strike against the terrorist camp. What Maria didn't know was that her intelligence had been so precise and complete that the coalition attack had been devastatingly effective. Every rocket launcher had been destroyed, every vehicle disabled, and most of the terrorist leadership eliminated. The planned attack on the coalition base had been completely prevented, saving hundreds of lives. But Maria's fight was far from over. Wounded and alone in hostile territory, she still had to survive long enough for rescue forces to reach her. For 6 hours, Maria held her position behind the rocky outcropping, while terrorist search teams combed the mountains around her. Her shoulder wound had stopped bleeding, but her leg injury was getting worse. Every time she moved, sharp pain shot through her body, and she could feel her strength gradually fading. The sound of explosions in the distance told her that the coalition strike had been successful. The terrorist camp was being systematically destroyed based on the intelligence she had provided. Fighter jets screamed overhead, and the rumble of heavy bombing shook the ground beneath her feet. Her sacrifice was working. The attack on the coalition base had been prevented, but Maria's immediate problem was staying alive long enough to see rescue. The terrorists knew she was somewhere in the area, and they were methodically searching every possible hiding place. She could hear their voices getting closer, speaking in urgent tones as they coordinated their hunt for the American soldier who had ruined their plans. Using her remaining strength, Maria began moving higher up the mountain slope, hoping to reach a position where rescue helicopters could spot her. Each step was agony, but she forced herself to keep climbing. Behind her, she could hear the search teams following her blood trail. As the sun reached its peak, Maria found herself pinned down by enemy fire. A team of 5 terrorists had located her position and were trying to capture her alive. They wanted information about coalition operations and were determined not to let her escape. Maria used her sniper training to pick them off one by one, but more kept coming. That's when she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, the distinctive whop 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 of American helicopters approaching her position. A rescue team had been dispatched as soon as her radio transmission ended, and they had been searching for her throughout the night and morning. The rescue helicopters arrived just as Maria's ammunition was running low. 2 Apache gunships cleared the area of remaining terrorists while a Black Hawk helicopter landed to extract her. The rescue team was amazed to find her still fighting after being wounded and alone for so long. "How many enemy did you engage?" the medic asked as they loaded Maria onto a stretcher. "Lost count," Maria replied weakly. "Did the intelligence get through? Did they stop the attack?" "The base is safe," the medic assured her. "Complete success. You saved a lot of lives today, Sergeant." During the helicopter ride to the medical facility, Maria drifted in and out of consciousness. She had lost significant blood from her wounds, and the doctors weren't sure she would survive. For 3 days, she remained in critical condition while surgeons worked to repair the damage to her shoulder and leg. When Maria finally woke up, she found Colonel Martinez sitting beside her hospital bed. His face was serious, but she could see relief in his eyes. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I got hit by a truck," Maria replied, trying to sit up. "What happened to the base? Are they safe?" "Everyone is safe," the colonel confirmed. "Your intelligence was so detailed and accurate that we were able to destroy the entire terrorist operation before they could launch their attack. 812 soldiers owe their lives to what you did up there." Maria felt a wave of relief wash over her. The pain and sacrifice had been worth it, but she also knew that the injuries she had sustained would probably end her combat career. "What's the damage?" she asked, looking down at her bandaged body. Colonel Martinez's expression grew somber. Significant nerve damage in your shoulder and your leg will never be the same. The doctors think you'll walk again, but not without a limp. I'm sorry, Maria, your fighting days are over. The news hit Maria harder than she had expected. Being a soldier wasn't just her job. It was her identity, her purpose in life. The thought of returning to a desk job while other soldiers faced the dangers she could no longer handle was almost unbearable. 3 months later, Maria returned to Fort Campbell with a chest full of medals she couldn't talk about and a service record that remained classified. The Army had awarded her the Silver Star for her actions in Afghanistan, but the citation was deliberately vague to protect operational security. Most people at the base saw only her injuries and assumed she had been a casualty of war rather than a hero. Back at Fort Campbell, Thompson and his fellow recruits had completed their training and were preparing for their own deployment to Afghanistan. Thompson had been bragging about his upcoming assignment, telling anyone who would listen that he was ready to show everyone what a real soldier looked like. It was Captain Williams, the personnel officer, who first began to piece together the truth about Maria's service record. While processing routine paperwork, he noticed discrepancies in her file, gaps in her deployment history that could only mean classified operations, and commendations from units that didn't officially exist. Curious, Captain Williams used his security clearance to dig deeper. What he discovered astonished him. Maria Rodriguez wasn't just another wounded soldier returning from overseas. She was one of the most decorated special operations soldiers in the entire Army, with a record of classified missions that read like something from a Hollywood movie. The revelation that changed everything came when Captain Williams learned about Maria's final mission. Through official channels, he discovered that she had single-handedly prevented a terrorist attack that would have been one of the deadliest incidents of the entire war. The base she had saved was the same one where Thompson and several other Fort Campbell soldiers would soon be stationed. Captain Williams faced a dilemma. Maria's heroic actions remained classified, and he couldn't reveal the details without authorization from higher command. But he also couldn't stand by and watch brave soldiers being mocked and ridiculed by people who owed their future safety to her sacrifice. The opportunity to act came when Thompson's unit was scheduled for a pre-deployment briefing about the base where they would be stationed. Captain Williams requested permission to include some general information about recent security threats in the area, without revealing classified details. During the briefing, Thompson and his fellow recruits learned that their base had recently been the target of a major terrorist attack that had been prevented by intelligence gathered by American Special Operations Forces. The briefing officer explained that a single soldier had risked her life to gather the information that saved the base. Though he couldn't provide specific details due to security classifications, the soldier who gathered this intelligence sustained significant injuries during the mission, Captain Williams explained to the attentive recruits. She's currently stationed right here at Fort Campbell, recovering from wounds received while protecting the very base where you'll be serving. Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Something about the briefing officer's tone suggested that this information was more than just historical background. Sir, Thompson asked, is this soldier still on active duty? Yes, Captain Williams replied, looking directly at Thompson. And I suspect you've already met her, though you might not have realized her significance at the time. After the briefing, Thompson and several other recruits approached Captain Williams with questions. They wanted to know more about the soldier who had saved their future base, but the captain couldn't provide additional details without proper authorization. What he could do was suggest that they pay more attention to the veterans around them, especially those who had been wounded in service to their country. He reminded them that every soldier at Fort Campbell had a story, and that the most heroic stories were often the ones that could never be told. That evening, Thompson found himself thinking about the wounded soldier he and his friends had mocked weeks earlier. The timing seemed too coincidental. A female soldier with combat injuries recently returned from Afghanistan, now assigned to desk duty at Fort Campbell. Could she be the hero from the briefing? The revelation came on a Tuesday morning when Thompson was walking to the commissary with his deployment orders in hand. He had been scheduled to ship out to Afghanistan in 2 weeks, and the weight of leaving for his first combat deployment was finally hitting him. As he passed the personnel office, he saw her, the same wounded soldier he had mocked weeks earlier sitting at a desk processing paperwork. This time, Thompson stopped and really looked at her. Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, according to the nameplate on her desk. He noticed the way she favored her left arm and how she shifted her weight to accommodate her injured leg. For the first time, he wondered what had caused those injuries and what she had experienced to earn them. Thompson's curiosity got the better of him. That afternoon, he approached Sergeant Davis, who had recently returned from the same area of Afghanistan where Thompson would be deployed. Davis had been unusually quiet about his experiences overseas, but Thompson hoped he might provide some insight. "Davis, you were stationed at Forward Operating Base Chapman, right?" Thompson asked. "That's where I'm being assigned." Davis looked up from his equipment maintenance with a serious expression. "Yeah, I was there. Good base, good people. You'll be safe there." The briefing officer mentioned that the base was almost attacked by terrorists but was saved by intelligence from a special ops mission. "Do you know anything about that?" Davis's expression changed immediately. He set down his tools and looked around to make sure no one was listening. "What exactly did they tell you in that briefing?" "Just that one soldier gathered intelligence that prevented a major attack. They said she was wounded during the mission and is now stationed here at Fort Campbell." Davis was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing how much he could say. Finally, he spoke in a low voice. "Thompson, that attack would have killed everyone at the base. Hundreds of soldiers, medical staff, civilians, everyone. The terrorists had enough firepower to level the entire compound. And one soldier stopped all that? Not stopped, prevented. She stayed behind enemy lines for 2 days, alone gathering intelligence while being hunted by over 200 enemy fighters. When she finally transmitted the information, she had to do it knowing it would reveal her position and likely get her killed." Thompson felt a chill run down his spine. "What happened to her?" "She held off multiple enemy patrols for 6 hours while wounded, until rescue helicopters could reach her. By the time they found her, she had taken out 15 enemy fighters single-handedly. The doctors weren't sure she'd survive. Do you know who she is?" Davis looked directly at Thompson. "I can't tell you specifics because most of it's still classified. But I will say this. If you've been disrespectful to any wounded soldiers at this base, you might want to reconsider your attitude." That evening, Thompson couldn't stop thinking about the conversation. He found himself walking past the personnel office, hoping to catch another glimpse of Sergeant Rodriguez. When he saw her leaving for the day, moving slowly with her distinctive limp, a terrible realization began to form in his mind. The next morning, Thompson gathered his fellow recruits who had been part of the group that mocked Maria. He told them about his conversation with Davis and shared his growing suspicion about the identity of the hero who had saved their future base. "You think it's really her?" asked Johnson, one of the recruits who had laughed the loudest at Maria's expense. "Think about it," Thompson replied. "Female soldier, combat injuries, recently returned from Afghanistan, assigned to desk duty. The timing matches perfectly." The group fell silent as the implications sank in. If Thompson was right, they had been mocking and ridiculing the very person who had risked her life to save the base where they would soon be stationed. The person they had called weak and broken had actually been one of the most heroic soldiers in the entire army. Miller, another recruit in the group, voiced what they were all thinking. "If she really did what Davis described, then we've been complete jerks to a genuine war hero." The shame was overwhelming. Thompson thought back to all the cruel comments he had made, calling her Sergeant Limp, suggesting she find work as a mall security guard, making jokes about broken soldiers. Every word now felt like a dagger in his conscience. "We have to find out for sure," Thompson decided. "And if we're right, we owe her the biggest apology of our lives." The opportunity came when Captain Williams announced that he would be conducting individual interviews with deploying soldiers to discuss their assignments and expectations. When Thompson's turn came, he decided to take a risk. "Sir, I have a question about the briefing last week," Thompson began nervously. "The soldier who prevented the attack on our base. Is she Sergeant Rodriguez from the personnel office?" Captain Williams studied Thompson carefully. "Why do you ask?" Thompson's face flushed with shame. "Because, sir, if she is, then I've done something terrible. My friends and I have been making fun of her injuries and calling her names. We thought she was just another soldier who couldn't handle combat." The captain's expression grew stern. And what makes you think you have the right to judge any soldier's service regardless of who they are? We don't, sir. I know that now. But if Sergeant Rodriguez is the hero from the briefing, then we've been mocking someone who literally saved our lives before we even knew her. Captain Williams was quiet for several minutes, clearly considering how to respond. Finally, he spoke. Thompson, I can't discuss the details of classified operations, but I will tell you this. Sergeant Rodriguez is one of the finest soldiers I've ever had the privilege to serve with. Her service record is extraordinary, and her sacrifices for this country are beyond anything you can imagine. Thompson felt sick to his stomach. Sir, how can I make this right? Start by learning to respect every soldier's service, the captain replied. Everyone here has a story, and many of those stories involve sacrifices you'll never know about. The best way to honor Sergeant Rodriguez, and all veterans, is to become the kind of soldier worthy of their example. That afternoon, Thompson and his fellow recruits made a difficult decision. They approached Maria directly as she was leaving work, and Thompson asked if they could speak with her privately. Maria looked at the group suspiciously, clearly expecting more harassment. What do you want? Thompson took a deep breath. Ma'am, we want to apologize. We've been told indirectly about what you did in Afghanistan, about how you saved the base where we're being deployed. If that's true, then we owe you more than an apology. We owe you our lives. Maria's expression remained guarded. I don't know what you've heard, but most of my service record is classified. I can't discuss it. We understand that, ma'am, Johnson added. But we need you to know that we're ashamed of how we've treated you. We called you names and made jokes about your injuries. And now we realize we might have been mocking the person who will keep us safe overseas. For the first time since they had known her, Maria's stern expression softened slightly. You're deploying to Chapman? Yes, ma'am. In 10 days. Maria was quiet for a moment, studying the group of young soldiers. Finally, she spoke. Chapman is a good base with good people. Follow orders, watch out for each other, and remember that your actions affect everyone around you. That's all any soldier can do. Ma'am, Thompson said quietly, we know we don't deserve to ask, but could you tell us anything that might help us serve better? Any advice from someone who's been there? Maria looked at these young soldiers, barely out of their teens, about to face the same dangers she had endured, and felt her anger toward them fade. They were kids who had made stupid mistakes, but they were also warriors preparing to risk their lives for their country. The most important thing you can learn, she said finally, is that real strength isn't about proving how tough you are. It's about doing what's right even when it costs you everything. Remember that and you'll do fine. As Maria walked away, the recruits stood in silence, finally understanding the magnitude of their mistake and the grace they had been shown by someone they had wronged so deeply. Word spreads quickly on a military base, especially when it involves a story as remarkable as Maria's. Within days of Thompson's conversation with Captain Williams, rumors began circulating about the true identity of the hero who had saved Forward Operating Base Chapman. While the specific details remained classified, enough information leaked out to paint a picture of extraordinary courage and sacrifice. The change in how people treated Maria was immediate and dramatic. Soldiers who had previously ignored her or whispered behind her back now nodded respectfully when she passed. Some approached her directly to thank her for her service, though she always deflected their praise and insisted she had simply done her job. Thompson and his fellow recruits became some of Maria's most vocal defenders when they heard other soldiers making dismissive comments about wounded veterans. They were quick to intervene and educate their peers about the hidden heroism that often lay behind visible injuries. You see that limp? Thompson would tell new recruits. That's not weakness. That's what courage looks like when it comes home. The transformation in Thompson was remarkable. The arrogant young man who had mocked Maria's injuries became a serious student of military history and tactics. He spent hours researching the conflict in Afghanistan, trying to understand the complex environment where Maria had served. He also began volunteering at the base medical facility, helping wounded soldiers with their rehabilitation exercises. A week before Thompson's deployment, he received an unexpected visitor. Colonel Martinez knocked on his barracks door and asked to speak with him privately. I understand you've been asking questions about Sergeant Rodriguez, the colonel began. Thompson stiffened, worried that he might be in trouble for digging into classified information. Yes, sir. I wanted to understand what she went through so I could serve better myself. Colonel Martinez smiled. That's exactly the right attitude. I can't tell you the specific details of her missions, but I can share something that might help you appreciate what real military service looks like. The colonel handed Thompson a newspaper clipping from a military publication. The headline, "RID and Special Operations Soldier Receives Silver Star for Heroism in Afghanistan." The article was brief and vague, mentioning only that an unnamed soldier had prevented a terrorist attack through extraordinary courage and personal sacrifice. "This is her?" Thompson asked. "That article represents one mission," the colonel replied. "One of many. Sergeant Rodriguez has been protecting soldiers like you for years, often at great personal cost. Most of her achievements will never be publicly recognized because of their classified nature." Thompson read the article again, trying to imagine what it would take to earn such recognition. "Sir, how many soldiers were at the base she saved?" 812, the colonel replied without hesitation. "Every one of them went home to their families because of what she did." The number hit Thompson like a physical blow. 812 lives, fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, all saved by the woman he had mocked and ridiculed. The weight of his previous behavior felt crushing. On Thompson's last day at Fort Campbell before deployment, he made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He approached Maria at her desk in the personnel office and stood at attention. "Ma'am, permission to speak freely," he said formally. Maria looked up from her paperwork, curious about this sudden show of military courtesy from someone who had previously shown her only disrespect. "Go ahead," she replied. "Ma'am, I know I can never undo the things I said or the way I treated you, but I want you to know that learning about your service has changed me completely. When I get to Afghanistan, I'm going to carry the memory of your courage with me every day. I'm going to try to be the kind of soldier who deserves the protection you provided." Maria was quiet for a moment, studying this young man who had transformed so dramatically. "Thompson, the fact that you can admit your mistakes and learn from them tells me you have the potential to be a good soldier. That's all I could ask for. Ma'am, is there anything you want me to tell the soldiers at Chapman? Any message you want me to pass along?" Maria thought carefully before responding. "Tell them that every day they stay safe over there is a victory. Tell them their families are proud of them, and their service matters. And remind them to look out for each other, because that's what real soldiers do." Thompson deployed to Afghanistan with a completely different perspective on military service. Instead of seeing it as an opportunity to prove his toughness, he understood it as a chance to serve something greater than himself. He shared Maria's story, in general terms, with other soldiers at the base, always emphasizing the importance of respecting veterans and understanding that heroism often comes at a great personal cost. Back at Fort Campbell, Maria continued her work in the personnel office, but her situation had changed significantly. The base commander, having learned about the widespread respect she had earned from her fellow soldiers, offered her opportunities for advancement and leadership roles that accommodated her physical limitations. Maria was eventually promoted to the position of non-commissioned officer in charge of the base's veteran support services. In this role, she helped other wounded soldiers navigate their recovery and transition to new roles within the military. Her own experience gave her unique credibility and insight into the challenges faced by combat veterans. The young recruits, who had once mocked her, became her most effective advocates. They spread the word throughout the base about the importance of treating all veterans with respect, regardless of visible injuries or perceived limitations. They organized events to support wounded soldiers and their families, always crediting Maria as their inspiration. Years later, when Maria finally retired from the Army, her farewell ceremony was attended by hundreds of soldiers from across the base. Thompson, who had served multiple deployments in Afghanistan and earned his own decorations for valor, flew back specifically to honor the woman who had changed his understanding of what it meant to be a soldier. In his speech at the ceremony, Thompson spoke about the lesson Maria had taught him without ever intending to do so. "Sergeant Rodriguez showed me that real strength isn't about never getting knocked down," he told the assembled crowd. "It's about getting back up and continuing to serve others even when you're hurt." She taught me that the most dangerous enemy a soldier can face isn't bullets or bombs. It's the assumption that we know someone's story just by looking at them. Maria, now walking with a cane but still carrying herself with military bearing, listened to the tributes with characteristic humility. When called upon to speak, she kept her remarks brief. "I've learned that heroism isn't something you set out to achieve," she said. "It's simply what happens when ordinary people refuse to abandon their responsibility to others, no matter what it costs them personally. Every soldier in this room has that potential, and many of you have already proven it in ways both big and small." After the ceremony, Thompson approached Maria one final time as a soldier under her influence. "Ma'am, I need you to know something," he said. "When I was deployed, I told your story to hundreds of soldiers. Not the classified parts, but the important parts. The parts about courage and sacrifice and never giving up on your fellow soldiers. Your example probably saved lives over there, just like your mission saved mine." Maria smiled, the first truly relaxed smile Thompson had ever seen from her. "Thompson, the fact that you became the kind of soldier who cares about saving others tells me that we both did our jobs correctly." As Maria cleaned out her desk for the last time, she reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. She had started as a wounded soldier facing mockery and disrespect, and was leaving as a respected leader who had influenced an entire generation of military personnel. The story of Sergeant Maria Rodriguez became part of Fort Campbell's unofficial history, a reminder that heroism often walks among us unrecognized and that our assumptions about others' worth and contributions can blind us to the extraordinary sacrifices being made on our behalf every day. The recruits who had once laughed at the wounded soldier passing by had learned the most important lesson of their military careers. True courage isn't measured by the absence of scars, but by the willingness to keep serving others despite them.